Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. There have been many heartwarming stories of people meeting because of chance and creating beautiful memories. In this time of bad karma, it's nice to hear about some good karma. Here's one such story for you. Valerie Smith thought she was going to be the happiest woman in the world. When she found out that she was pregnant, her life changed and all she wanted to know was what her baby would look like and how he or she might act. When she found out that she was pregnant with a boy, she was thrilled. Valerie was single at the time, but she did not have an issue with that. She knew lots of single mothers, and she thought that she would be just fine raising her child on her own. She began to prepare for the birth as every mother would over the course of her pregnancy. She began to amass the items that were required. She got clothes and baby toys, diapers, and bath supplies. She also acquired the most beautiful crib that she had ever laid eyes on. Valerie knew that the crib was going to be the centerpiece of the room she had designated for her child, and she began to set it all up. Everything seemed perfect, and she could not wait for her child to arrive. A year later, Valerie was cleaning up her house when she laid eyes on the crib once more. She felt her heartstrings sink, and she moved forward with a heavy sigh. She placed her hand on the crib and then reached for a phone and snapped a photo of it. She thought that her best bet would be to sell it on Craigslist, and she was not wrong. Within a few hours of posting it, she had several offers. There was one offer in particular that caught her eye. Gerald Compula and his wife Lorraine had written her a message with a generous. She replied no quietly, and Gerald noticed that she was uncomfortable. He thought perhaps she did not want to disclose personal details, and so he thanked her once more and finished putting the crib away and drove home. Once he was at home, he took the crib apart and his wife Lorraine agreed that it was perfect. Their granddaughter would be thrilled by it. Gerald agreed to set it up in their house and leave it until they could surprise their granddaughter. He intended to wrap it up, perhaps put a bow in it, and then show her the next time she came by. Despite having 15 children and many grandchildren, Gerald and Lorraine doted on all of them and always found time to make sure they felt special. Lorraine was alone admiring the crib later that day when suddenly she let out a shriek. Gerald ran into the room, worried that perhaps Lorraine had hurt herself or that the crib had fallen apart. When he saw what she was pointing at, his heart sank. Suddenly he understood why Valerie had paused and not wanted to speak more about what happened to her son Noah. He put an arm around Lorraine as they started silently at the crib, lost in their own memory. When Valerie was pregnant with Noah, she had thought that everything was going to be all right. However, it wasn't long before she began to get pains in her stomach. She had thought that perhaps it was normal, but the pain increased. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore, and she went to the doctor. She was lucky to get an appointment right away, and she rushed out the door, hoping that everything was going to be all right. Waiting in the waiting room was excruciating both mentally and physically. As soon as the doctor called her in, Valerie knew that she would not leave this appointment happy. When the doctor heard her symptoms, he sent her for an ultrasound right away. Valerie hoped against hope that the pains would just be normal and she would be sent home with good news. However, she could tell from the look on the ultrasound tech's face that all was not all right. As soon as the doctor looked at the results, Valerie felt the air in the room turned heavy. The doctor told her that the umbilical cord had compressed the baby's oxygen supply and that he had unfortunately passed away. Valerie could not believe her ears. She could not believe that all hope was gone. She asked the doctor if they were sure, but it seemed that there was no way around the terrible news. Her baby son Noah was gone. The pain had been an indication that he had slipped away. It had been a freak accident. The doctor tried to assure her that it was nothing she had done. She could not have prevented it, and she could not have changed her behavior. He explained that sometimes these things just happened, and the doctor did not know why. He explained that if she got pregnant again, this would likely not happen. But Valerie was broken inside. Valerie went home and she never felt quite the same. She was a shell of her former self. For months, she couldn't bring herself to look at all the baby furniture and toys that she had collected. Everything was supposed to be perfect. She was supposed to live here and raise Noah, and they were supposed to be together for life. 11 months passed before Valerie got the courage to look at the room she had decorated. She knew she had to sell everything in order to start to heal. Letting go of it was going to be hard. But there was something about Gerald and Lorraine's email that gave her hope. She thought that perhaps the thought of knowing that the items would be going to another child who would make good use of them would help her heal. Back at Gerald and Lorraine's house, they knew that they had to do something about the crib. Gerald told Lorraine how Valerie had acted through the transaction, and Lorraine told Gerald that the crib had to go back to Valerie. They would not ask for a refund, but they had to do something to help this poor, grieving mother. After much thought, Gerald had an idea. A crib would be a reminder of what happened to Noah, and that would stay in her heart every time she looked at it. He couldn't simply bring it back to her. However, he did have the skills to turn it into something else. Gerald thought through a few ideas before eventually settling on the idea of a bench. A bench could serve as functional in the home, both as a memorial and a useful piece that Valerie could use carefully, as not to ruin the memory that surrounded the crib. He took it apart piece by piece and then rebuilt it into a small bench that could seat two people if they squeezed in closely. He found a blue cushion to place on it and a tiny blue teddy bear. In his workshop, he was surrounded by the pieces of many unfinished projects, and he was grateful that he had the parts needed right at his fingertips. As he worked, he thought about how much this might mean if he was in that situation. He and Lorraine were the parents to 15 children and several grandchildren. They had unfortunately lost a grandchild very young, and he knew that they would be very comforted if someone did something like this. He knew exactly what emotions Valerie was going through, and he wanted to be able to bring her any comfort that he could. He then packed up the bench and drove back over to Valerie's house. When Valerie saw Gerald knocking on her door, her heart sank. Wrong with the crib. She really couldn't take having it back in the house again. She pulled open the door and thought of a million things to say. Instead, it was Gerald who spoke first. "I know what happened to Noah," he said, and Valerie realized that he must have found her inscription. She felt her stomach drop as a grief was hitting her all over again. Shortly after Noah died, in a fit of grief, she had removed the cushion from the crib and carved some words into the side in tiny letters. R.I.P. Noah 2019 to 2020. She hadn't remembered it when she sold the crib. She certainly didn't think that anyone would ever find it. However, seeing Gerald standing right in front of her told her that he certainly had found it, and he was uncomfortable with it. She was certain that no one would want the crib now that she remembered what was it. She needed the money from the sale of the crib, but she was prepared to offer it all back to him. When he showed her what he had done, sitting there at her front step was what used to be the crib. However, instead of a painful memory, it was a beautiful memorial to her baby boy. Valerie felt tears stream down her face. She could not believe that a stranger had done this for her. She offered Gerald money for his services because she knew that he must have spent a lot of time. She thought that it was the most beautiful memorial. However, Gerald refused to take any money for it and told her a bit about his own family and what he had gone through. He then offered to carry the bench in for Valerie, and she accepted. She knew that fate had brought Gerald into her life, and she was so grateful for such a kind soul. Gerald told her that although the pain never went away, she would find ways to be comforted, and he hoped that the bench would be one of them. Valerie thanked him one last time before he left. The kindness of strangers can be everything in our worst moments. That's all for today, folks. Let us know what you think about this heartwarming story and whether strangers have ever changed your life. We'd love to hear them. Until next time.